Welcome everybody to KWLUG 2019. Congratulations, you all made it here. There was a little bit of confusion with our location. And I guess speaking to that, we're going to be figuring out where we're going to go next. If anybody has been on the mailing list, you've probably seen there's been various discussions, so there's lots of different options. We just have to sort one out. We might end up going somewhere that's donated. We might end up paying for something. I think it is still up in the air, so we shall see. We can discuss at the break, and we can continue to discuss in the mailing list. Unless anybody else has news items to bring up, the only one I can think of is the end of January. StarCon is running. I think it's like the third week or the third weekend, something like that. Apparently it was a good conference last year, so I know I'm going to go. So hopefully it'll be good again this year. I think that's it. Paul, do we have is there anything you needed to announce?
I announced this on the meeting announcement, but there's also this Waterloo Smart Cities Challenge thing that's happening, where they're trying to, I don't know, develop a smart city to help children and youth. So they're holding a kind of hacker event for that, and that is on Wednesday at Communitech. So if you're interested in that, I can let you know about that. I guess we can also do the usual request for presentations. I think we're good until, I think we're booked until March.
We lost one presentation for next month.
We lost a presentation for next month.
Due to appointment. 70 lawyers.
Oh, okay. So who?
Benjamin just mentioned he was going to do virtual something.
Advanced virtual machines.
Advanced virtual machines. Thank you. But he's going to be unavailable. So if someone wants to do, I think we were considering an advanced presentation, if I remember correctly. So if someone wants to step in and do some virtualization, we're happy to have you. Or if someone has something else that they'd like to present, we're happy to have you as well. But we will figure something out by.
Well, is there anybody who would be willing to present something next month?
As it's wavering. Well, I don't have time to prepare a presentation. I have to pull off the cuff Wednesday and replays.
Okay. On what topic?
Well, off the cuff is any topic, but replays, we haven't done.
Presentation of whatever Tim worked on earlier in the week. Which would probably actually be a fairly good presentation.
Yeah, I think I can actually talk about most of what I do for a living now. I was in a bit of a hole time there. No, so like I haven't talked about all the other development. That was sort of a whole topic. Bottleneck analysis tools, which I thought was kind of fun, and we could make that a group presentation. Like we could have somebody.
So bottleneck analysis tools?
Yeah, so these are things, like one thing I noticed, a lot of people will address problems by buying more stuff rather than first looking at trying to understand what's the critical path item that's slowing down this problem and then fixing that. Does it make sense?
Sure. Are you willing to lead that presentation / discussion next month?
Sure.
Is there interest amongst others in learning bottleneck detection tools? You have some? Okay, good. Deal. Are there any other presentations that people would like to give in April or later? Okay.
All right. Cool. So next week, I guess, or next month, will be bottleneck detection. Tim, would that be like presentation / workshop / Q&A?
I'll have to think some more. It's something that's rather large.
Yeah.
Maybe just see if I can swallow it.
Yeah. Okay. We will follow up. Oh, Doug.
Yeah, this is just a news update. I did a presentation at December 2017 about my open source programming language on GitHub. And now I'm up to like 118 stars. Other people are actually using it, like a small number of people anyway. And the most exciting thing to me is that somebody has volunteered to write an IDE for my programming language. This is the third time somebody offered, but this guy's actually writing code. So the other guys just said, you know, anyway. So that's way up to.
If you ever feel like you want to do a state of curve, that might be a good presentation as well. If you sort of feel like if you wanted to review some of the projects that are using it, kind of thing, if you were interested in that one.
Oh, I can't tell you any projects that are using it because.
Oh, are they all super secret?
No, it's more like hobbyists are dicking around with it at home, but don't post their code. So the guy writing the IDE is hopefully he'll actually commit his code to GitHub or something, It's all that's all happening in secret right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I guess it's hard to get people there when they're at the beginning stages to move and show things off in public.
Yeah.
But if that ever changes. All right. So I think that's it for announcements. So tonight we're going to have presentations from Lanny and from Jason. Lanny's going to give you, as it says on the tin, some talk about tiling window managers and i3 specifically, the correct kind of window management. I have no bias one way or another, of course. And then Jason, I have completely blanked on what you're presenting on. How to take over the world. Excellent. With free software, right? Good. Fair enough. All right, so we'll do Landy's presentation, then we'll take a quick break. If you need the bathrooms, they're all the way in the back. Then we'll do Jason's presentation. Then we usually go over to the pub for a drink and some dinner. Now I'm forgetting all their names. Abe Herb or the other one. Taste of the Tannery, thank you. All right, Benjamin.
One last thing. Hardware.
Benjamin has doodads. If you want doodads, go talk to Benjamin and he'll tell you about his doodads.
I promise I'll leave my clothes on.
I'm not going to record that. All right. Show of hands of people who are going to go to the bar afterwards. If you have never gone, want to know where it is, follow one of these people. You will find your way. And other than that, I think that's it. All right. Thank you to Laney. Oh, wait. And a big thank you to Paul for his work actually getting organized to make sure that we have a space to meet tonight. Thank you very much, Paul. And we'll all work on making it easier for you in the future. All right, thank you very much, Lanny.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out, braving the elements. I'm Lanny. This is my presentation on i3 and window managers. A couple of quick notes before we start. I do have quite a bit of info to get through, so please hold any questions until the end of the presentation. That being said, I'm also prone to being an incredibly fast talker at times, so if at any point I'm going too quickly or you'd like me to clarify a phrase or anything I'm saying, please raise a hand, let me know. Alright, so I know I'm a bit of a noob here at this level, so I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I first laid hands on a computer in 2nd grade. I got my first computer when I was in 4th grade. So that was a hand-me-down, candy-colored computer. I used to learn a bit of color basic. That was about it at the time, but I was hooked regardless. About 10 years too late. Just writing Hello World, and go to loops, stuff like that. From there I got a C64, then an Amiga 500, then I moved on to PC. First heard about Linux in the mid-90s with Red Hat, and I asked the local computer shop where I lived to order a copy of Red Hat. Instead, I got a copy of Caldera. So this was from the same company that would later go on to be the SEO group, Darryl McBride, that tried suing everybody in the open source community for incorporating non-free code. So on the wrong side of history already. Interesting point, originally I picked it up because I'd gotten a new Pentium 133. At the time I was reading these PC magazines hearing about Linux and how it's free, and I thought, hey, Linux is free, and it had lots of free games. So that didn't pan out, but got to play Tetris during the install, so that was okay. And I just generally enjoy the visual aspect of computing and cool computing environments. So as examples there, I have Hazeland Step, which is one of the first ones I really got into. It was like an old network OS that was used at my school. Also Tandy Desk made Amiga Workbench. So yeah, into that as well. All right, so to outline the basic concepts of the tiling window manager, it's best defined as one in which the application windows usually never overlap. Additionally, when dealing with the tile window manager in the strictest sense, all the available screen space is always utilized. So when you open a new window, it fills any space available to it, or it resizes an existing window to take some of the space that's available. So the earliest examples of tiling window managers that I found in my research were Xerox Star, which is a very early graphical user interface. You might know that one as it was a big influence on the Apple Lisa and later on Mac OS. Beyond that, earlier versions of Windows, I think it was up to 3.0, were strictly tiling, though I believe there were both tiling and floating capabilities for a while as well in 3.0, 3.1. It's kind of gone away in the present. GenOS is another example of a hybrid tiling floating window manager. So for modern examples, we have i3, which I argue is probably the most prominent nowadays. That's the one we're going to be talking about mostly tonight. There's i3 Gaps, which is a fork of i3. There's WM2, which I believe is the precursor to i3, and then there's Blue Tile, which kind of works tightly with GNOME in particular.
Oh yeah, and the very first window manager ever invented, Opman in 1967, was tiling. They didn't invent, it wasn't until Xerox PARC invented overlapping windows that, people got really excited, but it started with tiling.
Okay, bit of history. All right, so now that you know of tiling window managers, the next logical question to follow is, why should I bother with i3? I think all of us have a little bit of natural curiosity for this sort of thing, and that definitely counts regardless, but there are a lot of objective benefits to that sort of approach as well. First off, tiling window managers can be very efficient in that once you get a feel for the hotkeys and the general workflow, you can get almost everything done without touching the mouse. It's almost all keyboard. Though the option is there, you tend to wean yourself off of working with a mouse cursor entirely, and you just start to build habits of just keeping to the keyboard. And that does allow you to work quickly and ergonomically. You're not moving your hands back and forth most of the time. Additionally, you also quickly find that i3 in particular is incredibly lightweight. The install size can be as low as 10 to 20 megabytes depending on your choice of add-ons. I believe the i3 package itself is actually under 10 megabytes, and similar, during normal usage, it's about 10 megabytes of RAM, which I think in this day and age we can agree is remarkable, where we open a web browser and it takes a gig or so to render something. So on a more conceptual level, I also like tiling window managers because it feels just a little bit less abstracted to me as far as graphical user interfaces go. As we know, graphical environments are just one layer of abstractions that are kind of superimposed on each other in a computing environment. So you use a keyboard, you look at a screen, you deal with files and folders, but in a literal sense, you're still just interacting with data through a series of analogical concepts. It's just zeros and ones. With that in mind, often when you hear UI or UX folks talk about GUIs, desktop environments, they'll throw around the word skeuomorphism. So that's a concept where items in an abstracted environment mirror their real-life counterparts. So for example, documents are created in a notepad, stored on your desktop with your trash can. Again, these words are signifiers of how zeros and ones are created, arranged, written to desk, whatever. Unfortunately, sometimes that concept can lend itself to ugly-looking applications or unintuitive or less than ideal workflows. So once you get past the initial learning curve of operating a PC, you realize that they're not necessarily essential, and dispatching them, getting them out of the way can be sometimes a good thing if you're a more experienced user. In a similar vein, I find that using a tiling window manager pushes me to organize a little more in general. As I can't dump files and folders on my desktop in a tiling window manager as I often do in the real world, I kind of tidy them away as I should. Similarly, I don't like to leave unused windows open, so it forces me to be a little more organized. It is still possible to build those sorts of habits when you're working with a floating window manager, but i3 has definitely lent me a bit more motivation from my experience. Some people also prefer tiling window managers, and that it lends itself well to the workflow or the applications that you use in tandem. So as an example, I'm a big fan of studying by opening a PDF of the textbook in one window, then I open a text editor in a second window to take my notes, then I'll spawn a third window for a terminal session, so I SSH to a lab PC or VM, something of that nature. That's extremely easy to do. I don't have to Alt-Tab back and forth. I don't have to worry about one window overlapping over another when I'm Alt-Tabbing, worry about hiding windows in the process, that sort of thing. It's just an organized way to do what you do. In researching for this presentation, I also found that a lot of users prefer tiling window managers as they offer some inherent accessibility benefits. So less motor control is required to move and arrange windows on the screen when you're working with the keyboard. The keyboard shortcuts themselves can be easier than, again, reaching for a mouse, moving a mouse using a cursor, that sort of thing. And windows tend to auto-arrange by default when you launch an application. So there's just less work required there. It tends to be a little more efficient if you do have fine motor control issues. Additionally, i3 works well with multiple monitors. As we will see a little bit later, we have the option for workspaces that can be assigned to displays or to display outputs. It works really well with hot plugging, so you don't have to worry about chaos every time you dock or undock your laptop. I know we've all been in scenarios where windows are laid out one way, we undock, all of a sudden they're mirrored or they're out of alignment, that sort of thing. And it also supports monitor rotation if you're into portrait displays, so you can have portrait landscape displays interacting, which we do kind of expect in the modern day, but still, it's a plus. Because i3 makes use of all the available screen space, and it doesn't include a lot in the way of tile bars and window dressings and so on. It's also a good option for small monitors. And beyond that, it's also a good option for large monitors, especially if you're the type that likes to work with higher screen resolutions with bigger monitors. You can cram a ton of information on screen. You can keep it logically organized without too much hassle, and it just tends to work well with that setup as well. And I've just kind of added this one as an aside. Some of you might wonder why you would just use something like Tmux or Stream, because we'll see that they do kind of look alike. Though i3's visual approach does mirror these utilities, it's a little more rounded in terms of your graphics support, your GUI and mouse support. There are scenarios where you're obviously going to just want a text-only environment, but I'll kind of leave that to a different discussion. It's a little bit outside of the scope of things, but I'll kind of let you deduce for yourself where you'd want to for that sort of thing. Installation, it's very simple. With most Linux software, there are a lot of different alternatives available. There are packages for most major distros, so there's also versions for BSDs as well, just outside of Linux. Most of your app stores or your software managers are going to have a copy. This is how I started using it with Mint, for example. It was available in the Mint software store. There's a couple different versions that were bundled with your base i3 as well as your i3 with some additional add-ons. There are also some major distros like Manjaro that offer flavors centered around i3, sorry. And we also have ARM builds. Again, due to the low resource requirements, it works awesome with the Raspberry Pi. So it's a good match if you want something other than a terminal. If you're using a Raspberry and you find you have an older Pi, it's running slow, I definitely consider i3 for that sort of use case. And as some of you might suspect, it's extremely easy to install in conjunction with a floating window manager. And you can switch back and forth between different window manager sessions using something like DM. So as an example, on this particular laptop, got XFC as well. Log out of one, log into another. Fairly straightforward. So with regard to getting around in i3, as I mentioned, the majority of actions that are available are usually triggered by a combination of hotkeys. So by default, when you install i3 and log in and run it for the first time, the initial configuration wizard will ask you for a modifier key. So most commonly, the two default options they offer are the Alt or Windows keys. From there, most combinations are going to use a combination of the modifier key as well as another key on the keyboard, or the modifier key and the shift key and another key on the keyboard. So the most simple example is probably mod plus up, mod plus down, mod plus left, mod plus right to navigate between your open windows. Another common key to use is mod enter to launch a terminal session. And if you'd like to quickly search and run an application, there is a common add-on called dmenu, and that's usually launched with mod plus D. We'll talk a little more about that one in a bit there. Beyond that, mod V and mod H are used to split either horizontally or vertically before opening new windows. By default, i3 will split the window space occupied by the currently selected window. So if you were to open a window to the left, to the right, and pick horizontal, you can split it into 3 horizontally from that, or kind of split one of the existing ones vertically. With those hotkeys, you can choose what you'd like to do. Mod F full screens a window. That can be helpful if you want to temporarily grant it some additional screen space. So the example there is if you were working with like an image editor and you just wanted to full screen it really quickly, then switch it back. Mod Shift Q is used to quickly terminate an open application and close the window. That works in accordance with a protocol called WM delete. So if you have applications that are written for that, it will shut them down gracefully. It won't just kill the process. It'll save your work and close out as it should. Also, we have Mod Shift R. That's used to reload i3. So if you make a change to your config file, which we'll go into later, and you want to restart i3, that's your key. And Mod Shift E is log out. I will note that it's also possible to enable sticky keys for your mod key. Again, if you have accessibility concerns, it doesn't have to be a two-handed thing. Hit one key, hit the other key. With all the defaults being mentioned above, it's important to note this is all 100% customizable as well. Key bindings are a big part of the i3 config file. This is per user, which you might expect. Default location for it is home/.config/add3config. The window sizes and proportions can also be adjusted through hotkeys or through clicking and dragging with the mouse. So you can kind of just, what's the word I'm looking for, nudge them upward or downward with your arrow keys, or you can just click and drag if you're so inclined. Workspaces. So much like floating window managers, i3 incorporates workspaces. These can be hidden entirely, or they can be assigned per display. So, as you might expect, it's possible to have something where you say 2 or 3 monitors, 8 or 9 workspaces. By default, your hotkey to switch between workspaces will be mod 1 all the way up to mod 9. You can also quickly move an application window to a different workspace with mod shift 1 to 9. So if you can open something on one window and you want to just move it to a different display quickly, that's your hotkey. So I briefly touched upon the i3 config file. That's where we find elements like key bindings, as I mentioned, but this would also control a lot of the functionality for i3 in terms of your customization, the visual layout, and so forth. There is a ton of room. Similar to what you see for the config for something like Bash, it's partially sourced from /etc i3 config, and from there you have your individual per user customizations beyond that. It's extremely broad what you can do, but I'll try and provide a few examples. My favorite might be tuning applications to open on a specific display. So this would work off the window title. So for example, if you had something like Firefox, we know the window title is Firefox. You can pass it through i3 config. From there, you can always have a given application open on a certain workspace or display if you're so inclined. A good example for this one would be if you had something like VLC along with, say, a portrait and landscape display. You know that if you want to watch a movie, you probably don't want to open that on your portrait display, so you can tune it just open on your landscape. Beyond that, you can also use the config file to launch applications with a hotkey, or even launch sets of commands. So one example of that one is, if you're familiar with just like app update, app upgrade, and app auto remove for just updating your system. You're feeling a bit lucky, you can bind that to a single key, walk by your computer, tap, you're done. Worst case scenario as well, if you break your config file, you can also run i3 config wizard, and that starts the whole process from scratch, generates a new config for you, so it's like launching it for the first time. So customizations and other neat tricks. So this is some stuff that extends the functionality of i3, but it's not necessarily an add-on, it's more so general Linux things. XR is an i3 only, very common with Linux in general. There's a lot of little odd things you can do with it, like setting display size, inverting colors, and so on. In the case of usage with i3, it becomes an essential tool to manage multiple monitor layouts from the command line. So when I want to mirror 2 displays versus extending my windows between monitors and so forth, generally you'll just want to just do that from the command line with XR and R. And finally, it's very common to combine i3 with elements from other desktop environments. We're going to see a little example of the integration between i3 and XFCE later on in this presentation. So now that we've got a fairly decent handle on i3 and its base functionality, we'll talk a little bit about some of the add-ons. As you might expect, i3 is very modular, and there's a lot of room for additional customization through the use of add-ons and scripting beyond just your config files. So I'm going to try and stick to the most common tools. Please know there are usually a couple of different alternatives for each type of add-on, so each has their own advantages and disadvantages. So our first example is i3 status and i3 bar, which when used in tandem make up that handy little status bar. So this can be customized to show essential system information. So it can be something as simple as your date or time or your active workspace, or it can be customized further to show elements like resource usage, currently assigned IP addresses, status of network interfaces, text strings pulled from the web. I use temperature as an example on screen there, or any info you can dream of. A common approach as well is to pipe information to the bar through another utility. So you can use something like Conky and just pipe it through. Another alternative to i3 status is polybar. We'll see that one a lot in some of the screenshots I'm about to show some of these i3 themes. I previously mentioned dmenu as well. I didn't go into too much detail about it, but simply put, you launch it, you search for an application, it'll use a path variable that you already have and narrows down your choices as you type. So you'll see a little bar along the top of your screen, and as you search for an application, narrows it down and shows you most likely results. And you hit enter from there just to launch the application. It's very simple, very effective, saves you the hassle of having to launch a terminal session every time you want to open a program. You don't have to break out of the terminal or anything like that. So we also have FEH. This is a simple one. It sets and cycles through desktop wallpaper, which I know sounds kind of crazy if you're using a window manager where all your window space is always utilized, but sometimes folks like having just semi-transparent windows, or they have a taste for putting in some gaps in between and just filling it out with the desktop wallpaper. X Backlight is a screen backlight add-on. This one's commonly used with i3 when you're using a laptop. So it's used to control your LCD backlight brightness, and it gives you a little bit of visual feedback as well, so you can see your level of your backlight and so on. Perhaps the most important of all those tools, in my opinion, is i3 Lock. This is a very simple and effective screen locker for i3. It's highly themable through config files, so by default, it's very, very bare looking. You see a white screen, you see some visual feedback when you type, you don't even see your text being asterisked or anything like that. On its own, like I say, it's bare, but you can launch it manually, use it as is, but you can also combine it with a utility such as X Auto Lock. So instead of just running it as a command, X Auto Lock can be set up to automatically lock your screen after a period of inactivity. So when used in tandem, effective screen locker. And beyond that, we have i3 Quick Term. I like this one. This is a drop-down terminal that's useful if you quickly want to run a few commands. I like it because it kind of reminds me of the terminal you would use, like if you ever played Quake or any of those old video games, where it'll just pop down from the top of the screen, you just run a few commands, you're done. For what it's worth, also workspace layouts can be saved using a tool called i3 Save Tree. With this tool, I can assign a workspace to a given monitor, and I can ensure that this specific application, like I mentioned, always opens on the desired workspace or monitor. The tree in the name refers to the manner in which i3 layouts are organized. So you have a workspace, then you have sort of a vertical or horizontal axis, we'll say, and your individual windows. The layout files are in JSON format, if you're curious. And finally, we have J4 Make Config. This is a tool for quickly and easily managing your config parameters, such as your color schemes, your keyboards, your menu positions, that sort of thing. So if you're in the habit of creating desktop themes and enjoy switching back and forth between them at will, this is essential. And if you're wondering, J4 is only on i3. So to close off the presentation, I'd like to quickly run through some screenshots of some themes created around i3, as well as a closer relative called i3 gaps that's very commonly used by some of these theme types. To keep it in perspective, i3 on its own is very plain, very minimalist. What you're about to see isn't necessarily. In all honesty, I do question the practicality of some of these themes, but there's a great example of how aesthetically pleasing this sort of window manager can be. And there's quite a few examples in here that are built with functionality in mind, so function over fashion in some of these cases. All right. So these are all coming from a subreddit called Unix Forum, which is very common now for open source OSs with different types of window managers, desktop environments. This one is from a user RW5601. So this is using Polybar, which is an alternative to dmenu. And you can kind of see it there. It's not the best quality, but it's along the bottom of the screen. There's also a couple things here like a file manager, and they're using a music player as well. You can see on the bottom right there that there's a bit of a visualizer there for that. This next one is from that same user, again using Polybar. This time you can see a little bit of the example of the configurability, and that Polybar is now along the top of the screen. A lot of the information included in that screenshot as well being displayed by Polybar was changed. It's the same music player, which you can see on the bottom left. Okay, so this is a really interesting one. This is from a user, Peter ME, and this is Manjaro i3. It's tuned to work with touch controls. So you'll notice below, at the bottom of the screen, there's i3 bar. It's fed to the screen. It's showing system information that's fed to it from Conky. But right below that, you'll recall earlier I mentioned that i3 could be combined with elements from other desktop environments. So this config makes use of XFCE panel, and the icons are bound to i3 functions such as close window, tile vertical, horizontal, and a program launcher. So the intent beyond this is if you have something like a 2-in-1, like a tablet with touch functionality, you can use i3 panel, or sorry, XFCE panel, and just have i3 functions just bound to a touch screen. We have another one here from a user named Nesmet. So this one's very minimalist. From top to bottom, there is a audio visualizer called Kava. In the middle, you have a little snippet of HTOP, just with the CPU usage and some of the most essential stats, and NeoFetch on the bottom. And for the bar, I believe i3 blocks is being used. This is another example. This is the first example, actually, of i3 gaps. So you can see there's a few little spaces there in between your application windows, and you can see there's a difference in color in the borders as well, and I think i3 gaps allow for some of that. Again, Polybar is being used for the status bar, and the apps in question, I can see Neovin is there, eLinks is there, and there's another file manager there, I believe, as well. So here's one that uses a terminal emulator. Top right, that's RxBT Unicode. Polybar, again, at the top of the screen. This was also created in conjunction with a color scheme manager, theme manager called Pywall. And I believe Ranger is used at the bottom left of the screen. That's a common Anchors style file manager. And this is an interesting one as well. This is i3 gaps again, but it's deliberately attempting to mimic the look of OS X Mojave. So again, Polybar is used at the top of the screen. You can see from the screenshot that it's intended to approximate the look of the OS X Mojave menu. And beyond that, we also have a shell that's open fish shell and a terminal emulator, Termite. Notably, you don't see the OS X dock here, which I kind of wished was showing, but you could see the idea of something like this theme being combined with, say, Docky or Plank or something of that nature to reflect how the OS X dock looks. So again, just speaks to the customizability of something like this. And we have a couple more here. So this one's from a user called Frost. Again, this is an i3 gaps theme. NMCP CPP, I believe, which is the audio player. There's a CLI visualizer there as well at the bottom left. Again, Polybar being used. Again, Polybar looking totally different than it had in previous screenshots, showing how customizable it can be. And we have another minimalist example here. Again, i3 gaps, polybar suckless terminal. So the suckless package is very common with i3. I believe in the case of Mint, I want to say that's the one that's bound with i3 by default, so suckless tools. And simple enough, you have bash top right, I believe, and CMUs for the music player. And just one more screenshot here. I included this one just because it looked really cool, just very vaporwavy. We have polybar on the top of the screen. We've got htop on the right, it's pretty recognizable, and neofetch on the left, that's displaying system statistics. So just some quick notes on my sources for this. It's a great spot to get started here as well if you do intend to explore this window manager. i3wm.org is the official i3 site. It has an excellent user guide as well as a series of, I believe, 3 or 4 screencasts that introduces the window manager and gives a good rundown of its functionality. Also, ArchWiki maintains a good general knowledge base for i3, as does Gentoo Wiki. I find in general, I love those 2 wikis, even just beyond the specific tools or the specific distros, there is a lot of general knowledge to be gained there. Beyond that, we have r/i3wm, which is about as official as a subreddit as you can find for i3. And as I mentioned previously, r/Unix porn, just basically a space for folks to wig out, post pictures and config files for really nice looking user environments. And that is it. Thanks again for listening. I'll open the floor to questions and try and answer as best as I'm able.
So, if I want to like minimize a window down to an icon, and then would that be like an add-on to do that, or plugin to do that?
Down to an icon, I would think so. There are ways to temporarily hide windows. That would be the default behavior, I think, if you just set i3 and nothing else, if I'm not mistaken.
I use
i3 status, to be honest, I'm very, very simple when it comes to i3. Like, I'm not the theming type, but yeah, I just like i3 status, i3 bar. I've actually got a very simple version. I can probably fire it up quickly here. We'll give it a shot. Let's see. So I'm going to see if I can just open up an environment very quickly here. I don't know if it's going to mirror as it should. It's a very good shot. So this particular environment is about as close to default as it gets, for what it's worth. So yeah. I was hoping I could see that. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'd have to set up a second workspace, but it's by default. We got a black screen with i3 status on the bottom left, or bottom right rather. Show you a couple examples. So we'll spawn a terminal. There's D menu. Search for Firefox. Do my best at typing sideways. Failed miserably. And there you have it. So you notice that it splits horizontally in this case. Nothing else? Okay, thanks again.